Hello, I'm David Kain, president of Kain Automotive, and I'm really excited today to actually be talking to a couple of friends of mine. First and foremost, you all have seen me and Alan Cooper hang out a lot, and we've become friends over the years. What's nice about Alan and I is when we get together, we actually can talk about the good old days of actually selling cars. There are so many people in our industry that are out there peddling wares and saying you need to do this process or do that process. They've never actually had to greet a customer and sell a car either in person or digitally. And Alan, I just am really excited to have you and Graham Line on the line today and talk about PIM Insights, something that you came to me with a couple of months ago, and you said, dude, you gotta pay attention to this. This is really something good. And of course, I hear that all the time. You hear that all the time. Graham, people are saying that to you. But the truth is, when you hear it from somebody who's been there, done that, like you have, and look at your accolades and some of the start of the digital framework way back in the 90s, when digital really was just a dream. You were a pioneer, and Alan, you were very active in it. Graham, you were just a little kid at the time, but Alan and I, pretty active in digital. So Alan, if you could please introduce yourself and then take an opportunity to introduce the audience to Graham Line.
Yeah, g'day. Allan Cooper. Obviously, I'm Australian. Even though I came here in 1985, the accent's not going to go away. So if someone needs to get an interpretation of some of the language, call David, because he knows it all so well. Yeah, look, my background was that I started in the car industry back in '86. I needed to have a job in America. I had to reinvent myself. My background in Australia was very different. It was the equivalent of West Point and Roche Pharmaceuticals in the financial world. And next thing you know, I'm a used car salesman in Australia, in the US, Costa Mesa in Southern California. And the system was broken, just with all the disciplines and the structure and organization that I'd learned from those previous careers in Australia. I had an ego problem. I didn't want to be selling cars. I'm a used car salesman in America. Come on. But I loved it. I found out that there were a lot of elements that were missing. And I'll shorten it up here. I mean, we treated customers back in the 80s the same way as we did when the internet came along. It was all about transparency and building relationships, loyalty and branding. I stayed with the same product in the same PMA. It was all Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, 15 odd years, all in Orange County, 4 or 5 dealerships. And the internet, when I'm just going to go to the digital world. I mean, it's the world we live in. When that blossomed, that really gave us the opportunity to amplify the messaging and to be able to work efficiently. Because previously it was a 4x6 card and drop a letter in the mail if you did that, and you might pick up the phone and call someone. But the digital world's just opened it up so much more. And, that's what led me to, meeting Graham back in 2005. We were competitors. We had Call Command, or One Command as it became. And Graham was with Goal Line Solutions, and we were friendly competitors with mutual respect for each other. And him being Canadian, me being Australian, we bonded pretty quickly. And, we had a lot of great discussions about how we could change the industry for the better. And we've continued to try and do that through various companies that we've been involved in and people that we've worked with. And it led to this here. I mean, now it's all about market intelligence, really identifying who are those consumers that are in market. No matter what the time frame, which Graham will get into, it's not, hey, I walk in on the lot today, I've got to sell you a car, let's slam you into the red car, even though you want a white car, which is the way I was taught by the Cal Worthingtons of the world. It's like, let's nurture the relationship. Let's develop that bond so that you can win that customer for life, not just let's make as much money as we can on this first sale. Let's think about how you're able to take that customer to a household level and to fixed operations. I mean, fixed absorption rates in dealerships, that's where the profit's all about. But you've got to have the car sold in the first place to get to it. So that's a quick rundown, mate.
Excellent. So Graham, PIM Insights, your background, why don't we hear a little bit about, and I'm a little irritated by this, Canadians and Australians, they immediately got along. What the heck, what about us Americans? I mean,
well, there's a few things that they say we export really well. Usually it's comedy and hockey players, but if you look at the Commonwealth, there are a couple people that prison colonies do drag up a couple interesting people once in a while. And happy to report Alan is a really good mate, despite probably we've kept talking about Ancestry.com, and he's like, don't go there, mate. We can't talk about it. I'm like, okay, well, it's warm. It's cold in Canada, maybe warm in the States, so we won't talk about our winters. But yeah, I mean, Alan and I have, look, you're either smart enough to stay in the business or dumb enough not to leave. And I don't know how we look at it, but in the course of NADA, we all kind of nodded each other at NADA, and we know each other. Some of us know each other really, really well, and others know of each other through connections and a hello kind of as you wave. And, the principles of things have fundamentally not really changed. It's the value of people, and relationships. And there's lots of great thoughts have come through the industry in traditional retail, as well as digital. And Alan and I have stayed very, very close to this. I've been in the business now 26 years.
Wow.
53. I grew up in the fixed side, actually, in an organization called Canadian Tire, north of the border here. We managed, I realized at one point in time I didn't want to be a retailer because I was just, a young family, and I wanted to use my brain more than my brawn, and developed a company called Goal Line Solutions, a little nepotism in the last name, but the reference to goal was appropriate in setting and achieving tools. And Alan and I competed against each other when he was with Call Command, and we were managing an IVR system similar to his on customer satisfaction and engagement, and was pulled into the business by JD Power to say, hey, you guys have some pretty cool data on the CSI side. Could you help us with something? And I said, sure. What is it? And I thought they were going to ask us, could you help us manage the fifth question on, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, were you happy? And we were doing that, 40,000 times a day with our clients. But they said, we have this product called PIN, Power Information Network. I want you to come to Detroit and Troy and look at what it is. And it's, if any of you know what PIN is, it's sort of the aggregate rolled up information on customer transaction business in the local markets. And they said, we have this thing. I said, it looks pretty cool. And he's like, problem. This is Scott Johnson, wonderful man, since passed on. And Scott said, yeah, it's cool, but it's 80. You're looking at data that's 80 to 90 days late and coming to you.
Wow.
It's like, okay. He said, could you fix it for us? And I was like, before I said, well, let's talk price, my COO was with me. He goes, sure, we could do it. And Scott Johnson deflected immediately to Joe and said, well, how soon can you have it done? And Joe, right out of the blue, said, how about 4 weeks? And I'm like, we build the tech stuff. And and I was like, what the heck? We scratched our head and we left. I said, how are we going to do it? He goes, I don't know. So we ended up building a team, a really successful team, to round this thing out. We did deliver the product in that time. And the team today that's with us for PIM, People in Motion, is the same development team on the data stack that way. So we've matured over time, and we've stayed tight with what we can do. Today, we're monitoring the active foot traffic of every new car dealer point in the United States, Canada, and good parts of Australia for the industry. We also monitor the aftermarket service locations for most of the national brands as well.
Wow, that's remarkable. And I think probably it's easy for me to absorb that concept of we monitor the foot traffic because in the middle of last year, 2019, I was moderating one of my digital marketing manager 20 groups. And we had a fella come in and present, and his name's Jeremy Onspach with Pure Cars. And Jeremy was, a long-term friend of mine, and he was talking about, everybody's worried about leads and calls, but really should we be measuring the success of digital through that? Because, what we really have to do is to concentrate on getting people to come in, and nowadays it's a little more unique, and we're going to talk about some of the changes that have occurred in the last couple of months in virtual selling. But the fact of the matter is consumers have always heretofore wanted to go to the retailer. whether it's for clothing, whether it's for a computer, whatever they're shopping for. Ultimately, that's the point. And regardless of the growth of Amazon and the growth of online consumer good buying, there's still a huge percentage of consumers that would rather go there. And we can track digital traffic. That's the easy part. But what always been difficult is, did somebody actually go there? I ran my billboard? Yeah. Did somebody pull in my driveway? I ran my TV ad. Did somebody actually come in my driveway? So tell us a little bit about this aggregation of data and what this measurement's all about, because that's the jaw dropper to me.
So great question. Following my run at running and selling goal line solutions, I took a stint in marketing with a company called Search Optics for 3.5 years in biz dev. And so I learned all kinds of things about digital. Most importantly was sort of the transparency of a community of enthusiastic dealers and staff starting to go, well, wait a second. I'm learning so much, and your class content and the content out through distribution that, Digital Dealer and NADA has become so strong that dealers now are very, very familiar with things. And to your point, we've been monitoring this stuff for the last 3.5 years or so. And, the more information and data we have, the more valuable the intelligent insight becomes, because it becomes statistically reliable in its volume and its tenure. And so what we're finding, to your point, is, and more so now important than ever before, is as we come out of this COVID retail coma that we've all sort of been shut down on, people have pulled back money. Tier 1, tier 2 dealers have abandoned significant ad spends because the market's just not there. The supply chain has to catch up to have the vehicles ready to sell for them. And so we may be looking at, August before we start to see real business coming back to fold a little bit. But what's happening with this foot traffic that we're seeing is the trend lines related to good behavior and bad behavior up funnel from digital media that's happening and taking place. We actually are rather predictively able to understand who's doing a good job with their media or digital spends and who's doing less than ideal in relationship to their peers. Because I mentioned to you, our insight isn't about just David Kain's dealership. It's really about my market area and how it's reflected in the state, in the city, in the county, and by brand. How am I doing? And so the currency, we like to call the new currency of understanding, cornerstone to the business, in my opinion, is what the heck happened when somebody went to the store or a store. And so we feel that in the absence of that, there is a blind spot. And that blind spot, we've shadow boxed our entire retail history around what the heck's happening. And we've relied on the sales associates, who are fantastic salespeople, but probably not the best journalists to document who comes in as an up in the front door. Often you'll get guys like me walking through and not say anything, and they'll put in, bald guy with beard as a viewpoint, which is, it's better than nothing, but the absence of information, it creates a vacuum. And by us giving more data that's legitimate to the PII level, where we can define specifically who David Kain is and what he owns and where he's been, if we can bridge those components digitally, we have a really great view of David's propensity to purchase or where he may be along the purchase line, so that we can stay with him over time to get him to become either a new customer of ours or a loyal customer of us being, the dealership. So, foot traffic's key. It really, really is. And we've proven that for the last 3 years.
I think you bring up a great point though too, is that, and I'm going to use an example here, the Nissan dealership in Costa Mesa, like everybody, had to let go. Well, let me back it up. Orange County dealerships in Southern California have been open through this entire process. They haven't closed down at all. They just went to the correct protocols for selling vehicles and what they were doing with demos and making sure that they were disinfected, or that's the wrong word to use probably, but that they were compliant with all of the necessary steps. But the Nissan dealership let go of all their sales staff, bar the owner, the general manager, and their fleet-tail internet manager. They've been selling cars. They've been selling a ton of cars. And the transparency of phone calls to foot traffic, to people making appointments, just as you said, there's no longer bald guy with beard and glasses walked on the lot. It's actually someone's made a phone call, they've turned up or not turned up, there's been follow-up, or someone has walked onto the lot, they've been seen to by management. And so they have reached out to their sales force to come back to work because they're selling so many cars that they physically can't do it themselves. But the problem is they don't want to come back because they're making more money on unemployment, making $4,000 a month, which is way more than they were making selling cars, which brings up the problem of, one of my issues has always been, just as Graham's talked about, what's the head count? Who actually came onto the lot? Who talked to them? What did they do? Were they qualified? Everyone's looking for a car. We've all heard that.
Yeah.
But everyone's buying a car at some stage. So where are they in that shopping process, be it 90 days, 180 days, or anywhere within that window, right? My point being is that we're moving into a digital age here where I look at it more like the Apple store. I don't go in the Apple store and someone ups me and tries to sell me something. They are great product specialists that have all the knowledge in the world, that are able to help me with my decision to the point that I'm ready to transact. And I think that's what we've got now, is that this marriage of this market intelligence, dealerships moving to a model where if they now recognize that they need to have really well-educated, and I mean educated in the sense of product, not college degrees or tech schools or anything else like that, but they know what they're selling. We're going to have this refinement that comes along in this digital age that should be the new era. People can't exist on an hourly wage. That's why they're on unemployment and staying on unemployment.
Yeah.
Because they're making 2 and 3 times what they could working at the dealership on the base California hourly wage. They needed to hit volume targets to make money. So market intelligence, who's in market? If you've got visibility to foot traffic, web traffic, call traffic, chat traffic, now you really can engage those consumers and nurture that business relationship.
I think what Alan's saying is that dealers need to be smarter with less.
Yes.
And they need to understand, particularly now they pulled back all their assets and said, right, what worked? And I challenge our industry that there's probably, 20% of what we did provided 80% of the output for what we've created. And then there's a bunch of chafe that maybe doesn't have to happen in this sort of new post-COVID circumstance. And so we like to provide insight to the industry on behavioral components on a daily basis, but also looking in reflection on this to say, when I pull the marketing lever, whatever one it is, does it have an impact for me of measure that is worthy of me saying, let's pull more of those levers and less of the ones that aren't working? And so it's a new horizon right now. It really is.
Yeah, there's no question. So when you think about insights is a big, broad term. And let's break down the name. So PIM, People in Motion Insights, right? So let's kind of explore a little bit about the technical aspects of this, because to a large degree, it has to do with this dude, right?
Yeah.
And what we all carry around and us agreeing to terms that we never read and stuff. So take us through a phonetical explanation of where you gather your insights.
Yeah. So the industry, a lot of you have heard of geofencing, and geofencing is, essentially capturing information around a physical geographic space. And in the early days, telcos, AT&T, Verizon, and others, unbeknownst to most of us, were working with marketing agencies to basically feed the cellular telco signal to media audiences. And as nobody ever said when you signed up, Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Follow me. Track me. So when we created PIM, one of the goals was whatever we do needs to be fully compliant. That's a very important message.
Yeah.
It needs to be compliant today. It needs to be compliant as globally as we can. So GDPR, Europe, is a big issue for us. And now with the new CCPA stuff coming out of California, we need to stay in front of the bubble on that. So the only way to collect information permissibly, and not everybody has done this, is through a way in which the consumer opts in, and opting in off of something. And so we said, well, what is it that consumers use in their mobile device that they opt in on, that they have to, consent to? Well, mobile apps. The entire community, the whole ecosystem and economy around mobile devices isn't around cellular per se. It's around all this cool stuff that we can do with our phone that, we never were able to do before. And without it, in most of our communities today, it's become, if you were to ask, what body organ would you sacrifice to keep your mobile device? I suspect most people would say, I don't know, gallbladder. There might be others that they come to, but the point is these mobile apps have a user level agreement on the backside called the EULA. And the consent is this: if I want to use that software for free, I have to be willing, when my location services are turned on, which is in most cases all the time,
Sure.
And the software is open or idle on the phone, to consent to share my location information with the app and the agencies and marketing companies they work with. That's how these apps, which are for free, actually exist. That's how they make money. And so we happen to be one of those marketing companies that the app companies work with. And so if one of 110,000 or so mobile apps are open or idle on your phone, and you have it active in an area where we have physically drawn the dimensional framework around a dealer point for, in this example, specifically the property line of that, and you enter that, we have a captured moment called the person in motion. Wow. And that person in motion then gives us rich details of where they rest. And that defines through third-party application information on permissible data sourcing information, who is David Kain or who is Allan Cooper or Graham Line. And the derivative elements of that, as we collect more and more information on that person, becomes more intrinsically valuable and comprehensive.
Wow. So let's roll the tape back. All of us have worked the point or had to be in the up rotation from time to time. The dream state to you and to me is you're sitting there and you're happy-go-lucky, and all of a sudden, bing, we have a real customer that is driving into the lot. How do we correspond this data set to the dealership? I mean, you've been interacting with dealer principals. You and I've talked about our friend Gary and some of the interaction they've had. Relate what he's talking about from a technical data standpoint to the practical analysis in the dealership. Why PIM Insights? Because everybody who sits there and says, oh, we can track, we can do all this. I've never really seen it done well. I've seen it done, a little bit, but nothing to this extent that you've exposed me to.
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back to, I do have to go back to the practical days of me being on the lot. And, my transition was 3 months selling on the line and being pulled into the fleet department with the Aussie guy that got me into the car business.
Yeah.
And that's really where I learned about your own tribe. That's what I'll go back to a word that used to be used in the internet days. You had your following. He'd nurtured his customer base to the point that before the internet, he had transparency to their needs. 4x6 cards, boxes of them. Send out a birthday card, send out an Easter card, send out a Christmas card, send out a thank you card for buying the vehicle. It was laborious, and you couldn't get to it by yourself. You actually had to employ a couple of kids to write cards, is what he did in the end. But where I'm going to go back to it is it's knowing your customers. If someone walks onto your lot, the most important thing to me in the dealership is longevity of tenureship of your sales force.
Mhm.
Because if I've been at that one dealership for 10 years, I'm going to recognize a lot of faces, going to recognize a lot of names, and they're going to be those repeat customers that come back. And if you've got people walking onto the dealership, even if you don't know who they are, don't be a cherry picker. Some of my most profitable and long time growth sales have come from one person that I didn't know that I talked to that, lo and behold, was the CEO of a big corporation, right? So my point to this data is if someone's on your dealership's lot, they're there to buy a vehicle, research a vehicle, which they've already done online. Now they're researching in a different way, or they're there for service and parts. So treat them as though that they're walking in with a checkbook or a credit card or a wad full of notes to spend money. They're there to transact, and treat them with that respect. My problem's always been in the dealerships that I've seen that breaks down is that we've got this tremendous turnover in sales staff. I go back to my Nissan example. Here's a dealership with 3 people selling a ton of cars, screaming out for their salespeople to come back, but they won't because they're making triple or whatever it is on unemployment. But the system's broken. So if that rich intelligence, that rich data, we know they're in market at some stage of that shopping journey towards that ultimate purchase, treat them as though they're buying today and with respect. To me, it's just a simple equation. So I've got to go with the mindset, with the data that Graham has got and we've got with PIM Insights, is those people are there to make a decision. Might not be today. It might be 30 days. It might be 60 days. It might be 90 days. But gone are the days of someone sitting on the sales tower saying, you're not a salesman unless you can put that person that wants the black car in the white car that we've got on the lot, because that's what we ordered. That's what you're here to do. You're a salesman. You're not an order taker. It's a different world.
And Graham, I know I see by that furrowed brow, you've got a thought you'd like to add, and I want you to hold on to that thought for just a moment, because I want to explore this. Because you are positioned in between, right? So you're helping the retailer to understand, people actually physically come here, but there's an accountability component to me. I look at it through the lens of, I'm working with X automotive marketing company, and they've promised me that they're going to spend my money judiciously, and they're going to make sure that I'm working with the buyers that are going to come into market, and it's going to be wonderful. I can grow my market share and increase my sales, increase my profits. This seems to me like proof on both ends. And so I'm able to prove that marketing works through that marketing company. I'm able to actually give them a tool in their toolkit. But at the same point, now I can also prove to myself, yeah, marketing does work because people physically came in. So could you address that?
Yeah, I think attribution, we call that attribution. It's like, if I did that, pulled that lever, did it have an effect? And that's become innately more valuable than the lead almost itself, right? So from a trend line perspective, we worked with a number of OEMs over the last 3 years who have set goals and said, hey, we're going to have a big push in LA for a trade up program for one of our lesser lines, our lesser model vehicles into more of our midline vehicle. Is that going to have an impact? And I said, well, how are you doing that? Well, we're doing this. We're taking a digital play. We're going to go heavy down on paid search and strategy. And we're going to put some, significant dollars on the hood of the car to push the volume of it. So I said, okay, great. So now we knew if you put a marker and say, okay, that's an event. That's a marketing event that's going to happen. Let's watch it and see what happens. Who's your target audience? Somebody mentions the brand model that they're targeting. Okay. So we were able to come in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later and say, how are you doing versus that? So in that example, we take that model that they were looking to conquest or to buy into trade up and say, well, what activity has that model owner done in market? Did they come to your store? And in some cases they did. And the first message is like, yeah, well, that's great. Look, it's working. And then the next message is, but would you like to know what the rest of those model owners are doing? They're going to your competitor. Wow. Significantly by a multiple of 4. And the answer to the question was, well, why? Why am I only getting a quarter of what I was getting, where my competitors picking up the rest of the model types? And so we said, well, let's turn our heads. I mean, this moment, this foot traffic is showing that they're defecting, or it's a precursor to defection, intent to defect. They're shopping. Why is that? And when we turn our guns into the Google world and looking at Google Trends and that type of thing, we see that the competitive factories or tier 2 or dealer viewpoint aren't sitting back just waiting for things to happen. They're trying to conquest your customer. And if they're outperforming in that conquest strategy over you, no matter how good your program is, you're still going to lose market share. And so, this attribution measurement of did they come to me or did they go somewhere else is as important. And I think what I wanted to add in that color with my furrowed brow was to say, not only to know what comes in and value the customer that shows up at your door, but there is a world of customers outside of your dealership that are shopping other dealerships. And if you had that kind of insight to that, how much more valuable and effective could you be to communicate to that audience before they may choose to buy something else? Right?
Oh yeah, no question. And you're good with creative and thinking in terms of the proper messaging and stuff. Do the insights afford us that ability to refine our creative content? The ability to say to our marketing providers, hey, these are better insights than what we had previously, as opposed to just, someone who buys a Maxima thinks or acts this way. Could you care to comment on that?
Yeah, 100%, mate. I mean, actually, I'm going to use the example, given that we've done work with Audi. You never know what the customer's really in the market for. And we all think that someone that's driving an Audi is, a luxury car buyer and driver, Mercedes-Benz and BMW being a competitive brand set. Yet the defection rate from the Audi Q5 is their greatest percentage has been to the Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Well,
Who would have thought?
wow.
Right? So these market insights that you've got, this intelligence that you're able to leverage to engage those consumers, knowing that, let's get very consumer centric. Let's make sure that our marketing spend is really focused. We don't have to spend massive amounts of money. Let's target it. Let's get a narrow laser lens on who we want to market to, knowing that this is the data set that is likely going to drive revenue in additional sales. And be it retail sales or also service. Let's not forget the back end around this as well. But obviously our focus is on who's in market, how are we going to engage them, what are they looking for, and let's make sure that the dollar is spent on the right segment of the market.
Yeah.
Yeah. So David, to add to Alan's statement, historically, large agencies take sort of a very vanilla sort of peanut butter approach to campaign management, and they run this cadence of programming over the course of a month or 3, and the impact on the business can be successful. It could also be a massive failure. The challenge of today, if you have this insight in this blind spot of understanding what the heck's happening yesterday or 3 days ago, and the trajectory of understanding what's happened historically over 3 years, what Alan's saying is, if my market in Chicago is struggling with brand sales, can I see that and understand that through the foot traffic? Do I see that one of my model types are defecting more so in Chicago than Los Angeles? And if so, why? And if I understand why, how can I engage that strategy? So we talk about this always on, always ready strategy to give the power of that to the dealer, to allow them to understand if we see these trends in relation to their peer groups, global, like on the national level, that there's an issue. We could go to somebody in Irvine and say, your brand defection issue is significant right now today in the last 5 or 7 days in relationship to your peer group. You might want to do something. Here's what I would suggest you do. And let the data tell you where to guide your decisions. The challenge with that is, and coming prior to COVID, was there were poorly organized structures to be able to manage that for a dealership. But like, I get it, I know, but I can't pivot quick enough to make that happen. And so, you have to work with organizations that have the ability to fluidly adapt, what I call the audible in the middle of the play, and see the blitz and then act on it to counter. Because if you can't, and you just keep running the strategy, it's like, well, we're in for the month, that's it. There's a pretty good chance you'll fail as many times as you succeed.
Yeah, no question. And what's interesting, and I'm going to allow you all to kind of wrap it up from the perspective of what now, and ultimately what comes to mind for me is there's so much data, so many promises out there in the industry. We promise this. It comes down to the people behind it. And Coop, I think that's part of why I'm drawn to this, obviously, from the beginning. As your friend, you've got a long history of successful operational endeavors, and yet, tomorrow somebody will call me up and say, oh yeah, we got this, we got that. You got to pay attention to me. What drew you to this, and why should we encourage our clients to do the same thing? And then if you could, Graham, just kind of lace up the shoe here to close this out, and tell us how people will get in touch with PIM Insights and get involved with that. So Coop, what's caused you to be so excited about this?
So it's well over 18 months ago. Graham reached out to me and became involved in an advisory capacity because I was fascinated with it, having come from the dealership environment, seeing all these people that walk onto a dealership's lot. Right? You go back to the old days, we used to spend $40,000 on a weekend in newspaper and radio and TV to drive. We knew if we drove 200 people to the dealership's lot, we'd have a 15% closing ratio. So we'd sell our 35 cars, right? Mm-hmm. Or 30 cars. Yeah. If you didn't get the 200, you didn't sell the cars. But there was no accountability. So when Graham said that, he's been doing this for, coming up towards 4 years of tracking and monitoring foot traffic into dealerships' lot and being able to distill that down and with the consumer's compliant permission, be able to communicate to them, apply the market intelligence. I went to my operational side in the dealership. If those people are coming onto the dealership, I'd love to know as much about them as I can to intelligently engage them so that I can make that business relationship develop in a way that's cohesive and it's friendly, not us against them, combative the way it is. So, the more information you got, the more educated you are, the better that opportunity becomes. And that's really what I see. I see this as another opportunity to refine the industry, make a change for the better, and really drive the success because, the auto industry drives this country. There's nothing more important. And if it stalls, everything stalls around it. We're seeing that right now. So this, with what Graham's developed and how we've been able to enhance it with other layers of market intelligence and other communication tools, it's just taken it that one giant step forward. It's the new currency of market intelligence out there that's going to make everybody's lives better. The retailers, the consumers, and the industry. That's really what drew me to it, man.
Right.
Yeah. So just to tie the shoe up on this, this information is, it's been tricky to collect. And now that we have it at a scalable level, again, the guys that built big data stuff before and fuel JD Power's information, we have daily visibility and soon to be hourly visibility to foot traffic enterprise across the nation. And our feeling is, if we can evangelize this storyline to educate the dealer population and the OEMs to say this is an important piece of the blind spot that is not well understood, and make it available for them to consume it, to give them insight to say, hey, Mr. Dealer, you're having a problem or you're doing okay in relation to your peers. Would there be some value to that? We feel there is. And we feel that if we can enable that data to engage a customer and act from a marketing perspective, we're going to change the industry. And I know that sounds like a bold statement, but in my 25, 26 years, there's always been this gap, this chasm between curiosity and an RDR, closed sale.
Yeah.
And we're now we built that bridge of data to provide. And we want to make that available to everybody at a very economical perspective to let them be more successful.
Good. Can I get this commitment from you that you'll only make it available to Kain Automotive clients?
I know when Bill Gates actually was asked, so Microsoft, Windows is only for, and, I think his first answer was, oh, of course. No, listen, you know what? The interesting thing is, I think insights are something to be honored to the industry. I think we owe it to community for that. But as it relates to working with Kain specifically, it's one thing to say, here's your blood pressure and walk away. J.D. Power PIN has done an extraordinary job to saying, you're sick. And then they'd leave. And they'd leave this, the body on the gurney, and no kind of cause and effect to say, and here's what you need to do to fix it. I will commit to you this, David, that through your extraordinary ability to inform, educate, and set objective goals for proper change management within a culture, I think that this data can fuel that. We need the pilots to fly the plane.
Yeah.
And we feel that in the absence of that, it's just data. So telling the story and then showing consumers what to do with it, that's Kain Automotive right there. I mean, that's why we're talking. And we've got some cool stuff, but it's only as good as you use it. And we want the best to use it. And that's why we're talking to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm a greater good kind of guy, and I believe this truly is for the greater good of the industry. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for the wonderful conversation. Obviously, Coop and Graham, I've enjoyed our friendship and what the future holds for us, no telling. But you all be safe out there, and we will talk to you again real soon.
You too.
Thank you, mate.
Hey,
thank you. You owe me a beer, mate. I mean, the last time you and I had a beer, wasn't it in the brewery in Kentucky? Now you're no longer there.
Way too long. We definitely are going to find us a local joint. So thanks a lot, guys.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Bye.